bank. This was before Zimra was actually on the payment. But since Zimra is now on the payment, this is no longer an issue. But the bulk of these funds were PSIP projects, where before in the past we had noted that a lot of our PSIP projects take time to implement. And Ministry of Finance would not have the funds just sitting in the accounts waiting to be utilized. So then we had asked that can these funds be moved into our HSF so that we can ring-fence them for whatever project they were earmarked for. And then since the auditors had raised this prior to 2017, we went ahead and we opened an account with IDBZ where all our project funds are now going into, and they are ring-fenced specifically for our project. So this is the reason why we had actually gone ahead and moved these funds from sub-PMG into the Health Services Fund.
And just to add to what she said, sir, we have supplied the evidence of some of the issues that she's raised.
Yeah, but I'm not very clear with your answer. Are you saying the administrators are referring to on those transfers?
No, we don't have anything written, but it's a request that we make to Ministry of Finance to say can these funds be transferred to our HSF, and Ministry of Finance then transfers them into our HSF.
But you don't have treasury authority. Are we in agreement?
No.
Because what you are giving us is an explanation of the circumstances.
Yes,
But
yes.
you're not telling us whether you hold a treasury authority with you to say you are allowed to do what you did.
That's a very good point, sir. I think definitely we have those explanations, but we're moving forward. We will definitely strive to make sure that we regularize and ensure that is up. Thank you.
Yeah. Doc, the question here touches on because you cannot just simply say we an understanding with the Minister of Finance. There should actually be a paper trail.
Right.
And without a paper trail, how would we know? Assuming that Madam, you are not there, the Minister of Health tomorrow, or the person that you spoke to in the Minister of Finance is not there, how would we know? So it's important that that needs to be sought from the Minister of Finance before we do all this transaction, seeing that it's a lot of money, $6.7 billion.
Chair. This is the rider on that, Chair. So that there is no repeat to this occurrence. Would you now, therefore, seeing that you had no authority, care to apologize to this committee that you did something beyond your jurisdiction, because you have clearly said you didn't have authority, as indicated that you do not have any paper trail, and you do not have anyone from Ministry of Finance to support you here. I ask Chair.
Thank you very much. I think you're absolutely right, because quite clearly, even as Parliament, you would like your document to be very clear and to indicate what we have said and so on. So we do express our sincere remorse for the action that we took. We do have the explanations, but quite clearly for governance, it is not good enough. We have got to make sure that is clearly documented. I think the team, the understanding was once that was communicated verbally and through telephones, and they had agreed to actually transfer, and indeed they transferred the funding, that was okay. But yes, we are very, very clear that in terms of governance, in terms of us moving forward to make sure that we have a good paper trail, you, as I said quite clearly, I would love to see that paper trail as well. So your example is very good, that if someone comes in and we don't have that, it becomes very difficult. So we do express our sincere remorse on that, Honorable. And moving forward, we definitely intend to rectify it. Thank you.
have had your excuses, Doctor. But what control measures did you put in place to make sure that the funds were safe for misappropriation under the circumstances?
Normally, the funds that we have, we have, in fact, as I was sitting with the team looking at the processes that we take to make sure that what we're doing is correct. The first point is very correct. There's got to be good documentation, and we're obviously going to rectify that. We made special efforts to make sure that we do have the evidence of the paper trail that went through. So as we move forward, we will definitely be reviewing it and ensure that whatever we have been approved by Treasury to transfer, as we send down on it, the documentation is very, very clear, and our monitoring systems are very much in place. We will definitely do that as we do with all our accounts. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair.
Supplementary.
Yes, Chair. It's not coming out clearly. I think the question is verbally oriented or otherwise. You got that emission in quotation marks. During that stint, what measures did you put in place to see that there is no misappropriation of the within the misappropriation?
Okay, let me ask our Director of Operations to update us on that.
Okay. For our PSIP projects, like I mentioned, we opened an account with IDBZ. We are not able to spend from this account without, when we send in our requests to spend, when you send in requests for payments, those also pass through Ministry of Finance, also give a go-ahead to say this can actually be spent. So this is for our projects. However, for the funds that have gone into our HSF account, we do have, our HSF account is audited also by the external auditors as well as by our internal auditors, and we do have a manual which guides us as to how funds should be spent from that account. So we have all the documentation which is there, which has been availed even to our external auditors for audit. So we feel that with that, we've put the appropriate internal controls in this.
Okay, but you also proceeded to open an account, which is not part of the main health service. Where did you get this authority to open this account?
For the IDBZ. Is this the IDBZ? Yeah. We got the authority from Ministry of Finance.
It should be. We do have the evidence. We do have it in our files, and we are very happy to avail it. Yes. Definitely, we'll do that. Thank you.
And last, what assurance do you have that funds will stand for legitimate purposes?
Sorry, please come again, sir.
What assurance do you have that funds were used for legitimate purposes?
Like I say, from our IDBZ accounts, because these are project accounts, which are actually underlined in our blue book. So when we send to Ministry of Finance to say we want to make this payment for such and such a project with our engineer who's in charge of the account, Ministry of Finance also looks to see whether this is something that was in the blue book, and then they also give the authority for the funds, for the payment to be made.
But then, but you also mentioned that you, part of the funds went to medical assistance for recipients who did not get vendor number.
Yes.
So the question that we ask is that how would one know that this one was a legitimate payment? All those payments have to go through Ministry of Finance, or they are within your, the decision rests with the Ministry of Health?
Okay, so those payments, when we ask for the assistance from Ministry of Finance, we submit the paperwork to Ministry of Finance showing them how much we need for that particular patient. So the paper trail starts from when the application is made by the patient to say I need help to go to India for such a procedure, that is submitted to Ministry of Finance with the calculations. Then Ministry of Finance releases that amount, so the audit trail is there for the auditors to actually see. And then when we make the payment, we are simply taking the amount that Ministry of Finance would have released, and this is for onward transmission to the patient. And then after the patient comes back from India, we then ask for all the receipts that pertain to the amount that we would have given the patient. So all that is in the packet and is there for auditors to review.
And in the event that the Minister of Finance gives you the money and allows you to transfer, but due to the constraints in regard to the forex,
Yes.
how do you reconcile? You have been given the money, but because of the failure to get the forex to pay, how do you then do the reconciliation?
Okay. Ordinarily, we would then call the patient if they are not able to go. We haven't had such case. We only have one such case where the patient has failed to get forex from Ministry of Finance, and we've now from the Reserve Bank or from their bankers, and we've now asked them to return the money to government.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, there is 3 issues that only come to the fore after the General is going to the current state of affairs, the current state of affairs of the misappropriation that she is alluding to. I request through you, Chair, that if they can favor this committee with the documentation, first and foremost, the authority that she's talking about from the Ministry of Finance that she says she has got, and then also the paper trail that seeks to audit the misappropriation within their internal systems. If she can favor us with a documentation that gives us comfort in order to see that the misappropriation did not further get misappropriated, that water seals tied the misappropriation that has already occurred. So if she can favor us with that, and also the last of the 3 documents, the issue of the authority from the Ministry of Finance again to spend, say she's got that, she can give us that authority to spend, Honorable Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. I've got a question to the Permanent Secretary. What criteria do you use to determine the beneficiaries of the funds?
Yes, that's a very good question, actually. Interestingly, this week I just received a few requests. I was consulting with the team to understand how we have to do it in the area. Perhaps I'll let our Director of Finance explain how this has been happening in the past and can move forward in terms of how we plan to move forward.
Ordinarily, a patient would apply for assistance through the Permanent Secretary's office. This line item is for assistance for any procedures that are done in Zimbabwe. The recipients of this fund have been kidney transplants, issues to do with the heart, transfusion, no, not transfusion, what is it? Bone marrow transplant, bone marrow transplant. Those have been the recipients of the medical assistance. So when the application gets to the Permanent Secretary's office, it's then forwarded to the Chief Director Curative, who determines that yes, this is a case that can go outside the country for medical assistance, and then from there we do all the necessary processes.
Through you.
The question is, you have not really answered the question. She said, let's assume there are about 10 or 15 or 20 applications. private sector receives, so they say, says to the director, who makes a decision. The thing is then how do they say, how do you then choose? Because you are operating within a limited market. What criteria do you then use to say, in terms of selecting this one goes, this one can't, and what do you do?
Okay, as long as it's deemed that they can go, as long as it's deemed that this procedure is not done in Zimbabwe, then it comes to us because it already has an approval and go ahead and assist. There's always been a budget. So far for the ones that have come through, it's been a budget that have been approved.
If I may add, Mr. Chair, we have looked at it. In fact, when I looked at the 1 or 2 cases that I actually found that had just come in the office, trying to understand our process and so on, while we do look at it, they come to me, and as she rightly pointed out, they go to our Chief Director Clinical Services, who works with the doctors that would have seen the patient and makes a recommendation that is required and needs to happen. The challenge that is there for us, it's an area that we will have to strengthen, is the fact that if we do have 2 or 3, it's a clinical director who then liaises and based on his clinical expertise decides that this is more a priority when it comes to, is it a life-threatening issue? So if you have 2 cases, one is not so life-threatening, or one has got to have the transplant like yesterday, the other one can still have the procedure a little later, then that's the criteria that is used. Having said that though, and moving forward, our unit is actually looking at coming up with a clear standard operating procedures to articulate some of those issues that you have just pointed out. Because I do agree with you, there's need to tighten up that area so that if indeed our clinical director is not in the office and somebody else comes in, we should be able to have the same standards and not a personal decision based on their clinical expertise. It's still important, but that standard operating process we don't have yet, but it is a priority that we are going to be working on.
So it is a right that you question.
Okay, through you, Chair. I actually like today that we have patients or people that can have such help from the government, and it's quite pleasing to know. However, I'm just thinking as I'm sitting here, do you work hand in hand with social welfare, or are you better professionals? Where does the social welfare come in, or you have nothing to do with them? Absolutely.
We do work hand in hand with them, and moving forward, we intend to strengthen that. The little budget, and let me emphasize, it's a tiny budget. It really caters for 1 or 2, and that's about it. So in fact, if one case comes and it's reviewed by a clinical, chief clinical director services, and it's deemed to require that service, once they go and the budget is gone, that's just it. Everybody else then comes after that. Quite clearly, we now have to work even closely with the social welfare, because then they are able to perhaps in their budgets or identify other players to help. We also, in addition to what we have in our budgets, look at some of our our health partners who come and work with us. You are aware the ministry has got a number of development partners that support us in our programming. So we actually also discuss with them and find out if there are any partners who can actually help there. But once again, the standard operating procedure that I'm talking about, that we need to urgently finalize and issue out to our team, would quite clearly include those issues that we're talking about. How do we, at what point should we be engaging social welfare? Should it be just at the very end where we said we've exhausted our budget? Should it not be at the very beginning, so that we're able to clearly say the urgent ones, we don't wait for them, because some of them are so urgent that once our clinical director says this is life-threatening, this one has got to go, they go. But we still have lined up the other cases or the cases to come to also be looked at by social welfare. And hence we have a comprehensive integrated approach of supporting those in need. Thank you.
Mr. Professor, how many patients would you say have benefited from that fund for 2017?
2017, I think, right? Four patients.
Okay. In the Auditor General's report, ma'am, there was a variance of 48,700,000 between the unallocated reserve transfer figure disclosed in the ministry appropriation account and the one disclosed in the treasury report. According to the schedule from treasury that was received after the audit has been completed, the ministry was supposed to have received 160,900,000. However, as at May 10, 2018, the ministry confirmed having received 68 million for the public finance management system, and the difference, which is about 70% of the original budget of the ministry, had not been uploaded on the PFMS to enable the ministry to account for it. As a result, I was unable to validate the accuracy of the total amount transferred to the ministry by treasury and the total expenditure relating to the variance. Now my question, Megan, can you update this committee on whether you have managed to establish the origins of the variance?
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Yes, we have. We have the details. We also supply them to the auditors, but I will let, once again, our Director of Finance give you a little bit more detail in terms of how we've done that and where we are, and then we can answer any additional questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, the 37 million as well as the 11 million was, the 37 was for employment costs, and 11 million was for operations. These were unallocated reserves, and they were unuploaded unallocated reserves, not loaded into the system. So the system has a correct value, but we are yet to receive the letters of the 37 million and the 11 million from Ministry of Finance. But our spreadsheets are not telling. This is the spreadsheet that the PS is referring to. So those unallocated reserves are really letters from Ministry of Finance that we are yet to receive.
Okay, and the other question?
Can you elaborate? When you say you have received, these payments were done in 2017.
Yes.
And we're in 2019. What efforts have you done? Because you can't say to us in 2019 you haven't received the papers for 2017. What effort have you done as a ministry? Because one would actually think that if you cannot deal with the 2017 issues, it therefore means that the 2018 issues are still all in the town, they haven't even been attended to.
Yes.
What effort have you done, and what are the programs that are there for you to make sure that the information is actually in order?
Okay. We have written to Ministry of Finance for us to receive these letters for the unallocated reserves. We have called them, and we will continue to do that. But otherwise, the figure itself in the system is there, is the letters that are outstanding. But we'll continue. I know it looks like it's been 2 years, but this was an audit from last year. So this is why it looks like maybe the time has lapsed is 2 years, but actually it's a few months.
Yeah, but your response, you know, to say you write to the Minister of Finance, you call them, and it's as if we are talking of a Minister of Finance whose offices are based in Addis Ababa, and you know, can we do something? You write a letter, you make a phone call. Surely there are times that you need to make sure that these papers are brought to order. Because very soon we will actually be going through your 2018 accounts. And if this is there for the 2017 and there are problems like this, what are the problems? There's a huge possibility that we've got a huge event of other issues that the ministry is attending.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's a very good and strong recommendation from you. As she rightly pointed out, this audit, we just completed the responses submitted to the auditors, and these are the pain points that we now have to vigorously and strategically follow through with the Ministry of Finance, because you are quite correct, if we still have it when we go into our audit of 2018, it just won't be acceptable. So we do take your point that we should perhaps, in fact, follow it up vigorously.
Yes, sorry, can I follow up? Yes. Honorable Chair, it shows here that maybe there was, it wasn't a delayed issue of paper trail. It shows here that maybe there was some reason to permanently prejudice the system of the paperwork of the 37 million US dollars. If by now that paperwork has not availed itself to the ministry, it means there was some prejudice which was permanent that was going to occur had the Auditor General not come in. Can she assure us that there was no, there was never the reason or the thinking of permanently prejudicing the system of this money, seeing that the paperwork from 2017 is still not come? Was she waiting for the Auditor General to pick up the flaws for a system to be flawless?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The directors are coming with a bit of detail, but I think if you what she basically saying is it's all in order in the team. Actually, there are no longer any discrepancies.
You addressed it to the chair.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Chair. My apologies.
So can we get it?
Right. I was saying at the very beginning when he asked, I specifically said we don't have those discrepancies anymore. Our spreadsheet clearly indicates that everything is in order, but we don't have, so I should be looking at us. We do not have the paperwork from Ministry of Finance, and that's what we have been chasing up. But in the system, it is not prejudiced. But let me ask our Director of Finance to elaborate on that a little bit more.
Thank you, PS. Maybe just to reiterate on the issue that the PS has highlighted, that these are unallocated reserves, which means it's money outside of our budget, which Ministry of Finance would have given us. But the only reason why the auditors picked it up was because our spreadsheet was not tallying with what Ministry of Finance had in the system. And once Ministry of Finance then corrected what was in the system, our spreadsheets were now tallying. So it's the letters that we are now waiting for from Ministry of Finance, but otherwise it wasn't really an issue of us wanting to prejudice the system by having these discrepancies, but it was just our system with Ministry of Finance, because these were not uploaded in Ministry of Finance in the PFMS.
The ministry without clear funds to the temporary deposit account required the treasurer instructions 1803 and 1804. A net debt amount of 280,701 as at 2016 233,825 remained outstanding in the temporary deposit account. Some of the balances that make up the amount beg the community ways. I'm concerned with the slow outstanding balances in temporary cleared. I made the same observation on page 216 of my 2016 report. Failure by the ministry to clear outstanding balances in the temporary deposit account may result in the fund being held in the suspense account for too long, thereby affecting the liquidity and safe delivery. So, my question is, why have you failed to clear amount outstanding in the temporary deposit account sum of which debts which date back to period between 2010 and 2013 financial years? And also, what measures have you put in place to ensure funds in the temporary deposit have been cleared?
Thank you, Honorable. And through you, Mr. Chair, may I ask our finance director to give a detail on our responses?
Thank you, please. I'll just start with why we have not been able to clear some of the issues in the system. In 2015, and this is an era which you see that relates to some of the issues that are going to be raised in the audit. In 2015, as Ministry of Health, we introduced the grants management module, which was going to take care of our global funds that come through the system. So when this grants management module was installed, there was what we call a document splitting error that was generated when this installation was done. And because of that error, we are now not able to clear things some things in the system because of this. But the project's office is seized with this matter since 2015, and it's an issue that even our auditors are aware of. Since 2015, they are seized with this matter to try and clear this document splitting error so that we are able to input and clear some of the issues in our system. But for further detail, I'll just quickly ask Mrs. Chivaura to just explain what we have done as a ministry to try and clear some of these temporary deposits.
Thank you, Director. Through you, Your Honor. In addition to the system error she talked of, we also have a challenge of misposted receipts, which were posted in other ledger accounts. And we are working with, we worked with our external auditors this year, and they recommended that in 2019, we engage treasury. So we've come up with a cost of about 1,450 transactions, which we have to use as our test batch to create. This refers to the this was misposted receipts. Basically, all the funds that were supposed to be transferred to treasury were transferred. Now, what we are left off with, these are just transactions that need to be closed. But now, because of the system error, we are also finding a challenge, and also we are also finding a challenge with this misposted receipts, which we are going to work with treasury and work on this batch, which we work with this week.
Also through you, Mr. Chair, the reason why she keeps referring to treasury is because we need to have their prior periods from these years. So treasury needs to open up these periods so that we can do whatever corrections need to be done in the system from 2010 to current.
This is just it's supposed to be a suspense account. Reconciliation. Our worry here is very simple, is that there is a possibility of certain fraudulent transactions which may actually be gained, assuming that somebody did something which is wrong in 2010 or 2012. If that person has left the ministry, it means that there's no way we are going to pick that in time. Probably the question that I have is, how solid is your accounting department? Do you have the sufficient personnel with the requisite qualifications? Because this is supposed to be a basic work of the accounts department.
Thank you, Chair. It's an issue that we are also going to be responding to on other observations that have been raised. At our district level, we are not using qualified accounting personnel because of the challenges to do with staff. What is it called? The staff establishment. and also the freezing, of course. So you'll find that in our districts and in our provinces, we really do not have qualified personnel who are doing this work. Because remember, the Ministry of Health is decentralized. So all these issues are coming down from the districts up to the provinces, and then we consolidate at HQ.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just to add on to what she said, and I know it will probably come as another question a little later, it's one of the observations that we will respond to. We do know that down in the districts, we are using unqualified, lower level personnel to help us with the documentation and so on. And part of our address to that has been to, one, come up with a detailed training manual that we've just finalized. We have done training of those unqualified personnel, lower level there. Most of them have now been trained, and it is actually linking with these findings where we did realize that, okay, we can't keep crying that we don't have enough, the establishment is not good enough, there's freezing, work must still continue. We're using these unqualified persons, but we can train them. So we've got that manual and we have trained most of them. We're just going to be completing the rest before the end of the year. And we are in the process of actually, we've got a draft additional manual that we're going to use to do a round 2 training. So this is the process that we put in place to address what you're saying. We very much appreciate that if indeed we are not timely in terms of getting our house in order, 2010 is too way back. If something had happened then, we will definitely find it very difficult to find whoever would have prejudiced us. But I would like to say to you, we are addressing it. We are addressing it the best way we know how with the limited HR resource that we have for this very sensitive area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to question, what is prohibiting no PS to replace the unqualified people with the qualified people? Because in Zimbabwe, we do have many graduates from polytechnics, universities who are just roaming around. What is prohibiting you?
Through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Honorable. I think perhaps what you are thinking is that we have hired and qualified people to do this. That's not the case. These are people who are already doing other jobs that are helping in that particular area. So when we say unqualified, we're basically saying they were not hired specifically to do financial books, paperwork, and so on and so on. So they are unqualified for that very particular area. But we have been innovative to say we can't hire because we don't have the establishment, we post 7 projects. So who on the ground can we add on a little something to help us work on that? That's why we're calling them unqualified. And because we've been doing that for a bit of time, we're realizing as we're pushing for the HR issues to be sorted out in terms of staff establishment and so on, work must continue, and hence those unqualified or personnel that are supposed to be qualified in other areas, doing the other bit, helping in this area, have got to be trained, and that's what we're doing now. So I look at it as an innovative way of saying, let's not just keep crying. We have personnel doing this. We need to train them so that they do the bookwork and paperwork appropriately, so that by the time things are transferred to HQ, things are in order. These are basics. He rightfully pointed out, these are basic things that we need to do correctly, and we take note of that.
Thank you, sir. Have I to fail to clear items because the account is because of the absence of qualified personnel? These accounts are reviewed by senior people that are suitably qualified and experienced. And I think what needs to be done is ensure that you put in place systems that ensure that items in these temporary deposit accounts are cleared within 1 year. You cannot have items sitting there for periods dating back to 2010, 2013, 5 years, 7 years, 7 years. Those you don't have qualified personnel. I think at the end of the day, the person who is overall in charge
Mr. Chair, and thank you for pointing that out. At this level, you're absolutely right. We believe we've got qualified personnel to do that. What we're talking about is where the data and the paperwork, the documentation comes from for them to then do their bit at the HQ level. So as long as what's coming to them is not good because it's been done by an unqualified person, then they also then struggle. That's why we're bringing this up. We're not saying unqualified people are then the ones who come up to a head office to clear it for us, not at all. But your point is very valid, and I am very concerned actually, if I may just state it here, that we cannot and we should not have things that are not cleared this long. So we do pledge to try and work to, in fact, work very hard to clear it. And while we're doing that, we're also trying to put systems in place, such as the trainings that I talked about, to make sure that whatever comes up at national level, with our qualified team, it doesn't have questions that delay us as we're trying to track back and see whether what we're trying to okay is correct or not. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really worried. That problems like this stick around for that many years. And during those years, there's audit reports relating to the same area. The good thing is that you are looking at it. But where is the core problem? Is it cooperation from Treasury? What is it? Because the word Treasury, there's a lot of reference to Treasury. Are you getting enough cooperation for you to get these things cleared, or you require that we also put in a word that to support the program? Because this, our duty is to ensure that things like this do not continue to happen, because it looks like it's part of the system. The system has relaxed and doing wrong things all the time has become part of the way we do things. So what we are saying, we like your commitment to that, but is there a way we can contribute? And are you getting enough cooperation, or you aren't, and you come in and work with?
Mr. Chair, Honorable, thank you so very much. I know Honorable Chair at the very beginning, he reminded us of the objectives of this to say we also want to come in and help us. So I'm extremely delighted that you're actually repledging that, because we will definitely come to you. I will ask our Director of Operations to specifically explain if indeed in the past we have had those challenges, because as we move forward, I would like to see us clearing it and not having it continuously, because it is truly unacceptable. I agree with you. So I don't know if you have any additional comments to give.
Yes, I think the main push needs to be at the project's office, where if the document error split, if the document splitting error is resolved, we'll be able to post most of the corrections that we've already done to clear, at least the figures will actually go down, and we'll be able to clear most of this backlog in the system. However, there's also the issue of the missing source documents that we've been getting from SSB, the deductions that we've been getting from SSB, and these we've been receiving them because we're also working with SSB to try and get the source documents. Because once these source documents have been sent to the districts, at HQ, when we noted that there were these errors and we're now trying to correct these errors, the source documents at the districts were no longer there. So we needed to have these source documents from SSB. So they've been coming slowly, but they are coming. So I guess the push, the main push that we need is for the project office to correct the document splitting error, and we'll be able to post a lot of the work that we've already done to try and clear most of these TDs.
My
question is on outstanding payments to suppliers of goods and services. Outstanding amounts to suppliers of goods and services remain significant, 48,104,527. 2016, 70,112,498. Contrary to Treasury Instruction 1204, which stipulates that all claims against government should be dealt with promptly and arrear claims be avoided. And I made the same observation on page 265 of my 2016 report. When arrear claims are not settled on time, there will be a burden on the budget. The expenditure figure for the year is understated. Can you tell this committee why you have not been able to pay suppliers of goods and services a total amount which is over 48 million, and yet regulations require claims against government to be settled promptly? And can you also update this committee on current state of affairs on this issue? Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, let me ask our Director of Finance to once again give us a bit of detail on this issue.
Okay. Thank you, PS. I guess we have seen a major reduction from 70 million in 2016 that the auditor is referring to, in 2016 to 32 million in 2018, which is currently outstanding right now. And we will continue to clear these as and when we receive funding from Ministry of Finance. What we have also done, we've submitted to you our budgets that show what kind of support we've been getting from Ministry of Finance. And our budgets have not been adequate for us to actually pay off some of our creditors who have, like, it's mostly utilities, some drugs, then, and rates, so our rates as well. So we continue, whenever we get funding from Ministry of Finance, we continue to pay these off, but the figure has actually gone down to 32 million for our 2018 submission.
But on that issue, how do you then deal with your suppliers? How do you then deal with your creditors? If, as a ministry, you have got a reputation of not paying for services goods delivered on time, like for instance, how do you account for that amount of money? Because if you look at your budget request yearly, sometimes there's a general belief that the payment for last year has actually all been made. Now the question is, how are you relating with your suppliers given such anomalies? And why do you then have to ask the suppliers to supply goods and services if there is no backing from the traders in terms of the resources?
Okay. Thank you, Chair. What has happened throughout the years is Ministry of Finance has made a release in the system, and we can only spend when a release has been made in the system. However, towards the end of the year, when these systems are now waiting for a payment, Ministry of Finance has asked us to reverse because there was no money to actually take care of these payments. So yes, it has been very difficult for our institutions to actually deal with the suppliers because our suppliers have not wanted to deal with us because of such issues. But like I said, we continue to get support from Ministry of Finance, and yes, on our budget, it will seem as if, in the Blue Book, it will seem as if we don't have anything from prior years because we were using the cash budget. But now that government is moving to the accrual system, you are going to see that this 32 million is going to be taken on board, and it will be clearly shown on our books because this is the way now that government is moving.
And for the record, just confirm, are you saying on record that in terms of the debts that are going out, that is the amount that is outstanding for your creditors, or it could be even higher?
According to the submissions, because we get these submissions from the institutions themselves, the institutions themselves actually give us these submissions to say this is what we owe as an institution. So according to the submissions that we receive, we get these returns on a monthly basis, and we consolidate for onward submission to Ministry of Finance. According to those submissions, 32 million, approximately about 32 million is what we are currently owing as a ministry as at end of December 2018.
Sorry, can you just clarify something? You are saying it's according to the institutions, according to your creditors.
According to the institutions, yes.
That's the amount that, but what about according to your books, the books of Ministry of Health? Surely you can't depend on all the information that you get from your creditors.
No, our institutions, our hospitals.
Oh, you're talking about hospitals?
Yes, our institutions.
Institutions, we interpret as if you mainly the creditors.
No.
Oh, okay.
So,
One of them,
Chairman, through you, I just wanted to know of the vote for 2017, what percentage of the budget did the ministry actually receive? Did they receive the full amount?
2017 we received about 70%. I want to say about 70%, but we also have to remember that our budget was 85% salaries, and then the difference was capital and recurrent.
Chairman, can I just have a follow-up going back to the initial thing where you said there was some 38 million which was which came in for extra for salaries. Was that to cover salaries?
Yes.
Because you hadn't received the full budget?
Well, no, because okay, if we go back the history of our budget, when we submit our budget to say this is what we want for our salaries, Ministry of Finance has a cap on salaries. However, that cap is not the amount that we need for salaries until the end of the year. This is why you find we have unallocated reserves that end up coming in onto our budget.
yeah, thank you, Chair. Chair, I'm alive to the issue that when the creditors, your creditors, when your suppliers gave you equipment or medical supplies, the rate was 1:1 with the other US dollar. And I'm also alive to the Procurement Regulatory Authority of Zimbabwe in the construction industry, urging the suppliers to be paid on the rate on the day of payment versus the US dollar. Have you also requested the Procurement Authority, the Regulatory Authority of Zimbabwe, to make sure that it is the suppliers' monies are benchmarked on the US dollar so that when you do eventually pay them, you are paying them on the bank rate of the day, on the day of payment, so that they do not lose value. If this amount was at a rate of 1:1 at the time, Honorable Chair, it is my fervent view now that they have just made sure the supplier is bankrupt. They certainly have used the medication at the right rate, but at the expense of the supplier. If they are going to pay this amount even next year or even end of this year, Honorable Chair.
Really, Mr. Chair, very good points. Those are some of the concerns and issues that we're dealing with our suppliers, where they feel very strongly the same what you have said, that the suppliers and they are not able to pay on time, and hence they don't get value for what they want to supply us. But I'll let you give a bit of explanation to your question.
Okay. We will seek for that guidance from PRAS. However, according to the Green Book of the Reserve Bank, we are under the impression that we pay anything before the policy, we go ahead and still pay 1:1, which is those amounts. If we owe them 20,000, then we are going to pay them 20,000 in the current rate. But I'll ask Mr. Mzimu to just assist us with the rates issue. But however, for current procurements that were done after the monetary policy, we've been paying them using the rate of the day. But anything before that, it was 1:1.
Mr. Mzimu, our procurement 4%.
Thank you. The thing just in addition is that if a transaction was made in US dollars in 2017, then it was clear in the contract that this was in US dollars. The current payment will be the rate of that day when the payment is being done. But if it was made using a rate of $1, then the payment is exactly what the director finance is indicating.
So, can you come again? It's not here after being clear. The rate applicable at that particular time, it was the US dollar was equivalent to the RTGS. It was 1:1. And what is the difference? You are saying if it was clearly stated US dollar, was other suppliers, because they thought it was 1:1, they would actually simply have put it at it was US dollar. Yeah, it was US dollar. So can you just come again and clarify? We didn't get your point clear.
Yes, the point is that if the contract of the supplier indicated that the amount that was being paid is US dollars, and when the payment is being done, the payment should consider that the amount that is being paid is either US dollars as 1:1, or it is RTGS according to the rate of the supplier.
No, you see, look, during that time, all payments were US dollars. There was no RTGS. The RTGS came post monetary policy. His explanation, we are failing to really understand what he's saying. Because all invoices that were submitted to the Ministry of Health were all coded in US dollars.
I think in that area, we will seek guidance from Minister of Finance, because it's still also a bit hazy. I'm whispering with her, and we'll sit down as a team and try and understand whether we are indeed doing the right thing, or perhaps we actually we could be guided otherwise.
Okay. Then, Doc, the receipts and disbursements return. The ministry submitted an inaccurate receipts and disbursement returns, which could not divide the change. According to the information disclosed in the return, the post not receipted totaling 980,000, yet the same return reflected the total amount of 463,000 that was deposited into the extra account, resulting in a shortfall of about 516,961 that was not explained. Under normal circumstances, the amount of post not receipted should reflect having been deposited into the extra account of the consolidated revenue fund. Further to the above, there was a difference of about 821,000 between the figures on the receipts and disbursement return and on the PFMS, which was not reconciled. The question there is, why did you submit to the Auditor General an inaccurate return that was so materially misstated? And secondly, yes, that shortfall now been deposited into the exchequer account, and the huge difference of 821,000 between the returns submitted for audit and what was reflected in the PF. Can you tell this committee whether you have been able to produce reconciliation statements?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Like I had mentioned earlier on, that the reason why we are not able to post some of the transactions in the system is because our system has an error from the document splitting, which needs to be cleared by the post office in order for us to do that. However, the table that is shown in the book, the auditors have 82,000 when it's actually supposed to be 75, and for CBZ they have 49 when it's actually supposed to be 21. So we continue what the funds have actually gone to the consolidated funds, but the anomaly is now on actually getting the correct figures in the system because of this error that is in the system. So we have the documents for the auditors to look at, but in the system that figure will continue to be as it is because we are not able to clear these issues in the system.
Sorry, Chair. Chair, we continue to chase our tail here. It was alluded earlier that we have a large amount of people that are degreed that are roaming the streets. And we continue to be told about this document splitting error. Whereas we can burn midnight candles and get this sorted out in one day, in less than 24 hours, because of the techniques that were endowed with as a nation. What is it that, is there some corruption, collusion and nepotism in that department that makes sure that it is not interrogated in the manner that it's supposed to be interrogated, so that we get to the end of this? This document splitting error, misposting, lack of source document, seriously, we cannot sit here and continue to back this whole tree.
Chairman, can I support that supplementary?
Okay, yes.
This document splitting, is it a computer error or input error, i.e. human error?
It's a computer error.
And my second part of the question is, how long has it been going on? Because backing what Honourable Nduna says, it's been going on for more than a year. Why is it still going on?
It's been going on since 2015. And so project office is working.
Please, I do like what the honourables are saying, because we have got to get it sorted out, and because this is coming from the Ministry of Finance unit that help us work with that computer error. He asked us, what is it that you can do to support us? This is one big issue for us that we hope you can actually help us as we push. Coming from here, I will definitely write another letter to try and get the team in finance to help us sort this out, so that we don't continue to have this splitting challenge and issue. Perhaps we are not understanding it, but I think it's an area that when I sat with the team to discuss some of these challenges, this kept coming up. So supporting that area would be very helpful.
Can you confirm to us, do you have this paper trail of the request that you have actually put to the Minister of Finance pertaining to this issue? Because our fear is that your ministry is actually covering up some fraudulent activities, and you are hiding under the question of the computer error. Was it surely 2015?
Yeah, that's long.
2015 is a long period, and the Director for Finance, you truly speaking, you can't. You should be very, very worried to have a computer system that can go to 2015. If it was to say, no, there's something that happened in 2018, being in 2019, would probably say you are going to work on it. But the fact that you are taking life as normal, and there's no agents in terms of addressing that, wouldn't it be prudent for this committee to think that maybe there is a deliberate reason why you don't want to quickly solve those issues? Because unless you are telling us that, because the Minister of Finance, the Treasury is not represented today.
Yes, that's correct.
The back, in our view, stops at you, Permanent Secretary and the Director of Finance. What is happening?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is an issue which we have talked to Ministry of Finance about over and over. I've personally talked to the Accountant General, Mr. Mchengwa, in regards to this issue. That every month we have items which are open in the system, which we are not able to clear, and keep on accumulating for our ministry because of this error, which cannot be cleared since 2015 by the project office. So it's an issue. We've written several letters, we've had meetings with Ministry of Finance, and we have the proof to show you that we've written to them several times. And every time when we submit our returns, our monthly returns, it's an issue that we highlight to them, that we've got a lot of works in progress, which are open items, that we are failing to clear because of this document splitting in the system. So yes, we are really seized with this matter. And the push from the parliamentarians, from this committee, for project office to actually clear this, it would actually help us to clear a lot of the items for us which are outstanding.
I think we need the evidence.
Yes.
If you could supply to us in late 7 days, because to us this is actually key into the accounts of the ministry.
This is where we were asking that we may weigh in. If the PS also, if it is permissible, copy us when we write to the ministry this time.
Okay. Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you very much. I'm hearing 2 action points. You would like to provide you with the documentation that clearly shows that we have been following up and not just talking on the phone, and we will do that. Point number 2, as I promised, that I will write once again, is an additional request that the team has already been doing to Minister of Finance, and you're basically saying I should copy you. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair. Given this scenario, does the Permanent Secretary and the Director of Finance sense some arrogance, naivety, or involvement in fraudulent activities from the Ministry of Finance operatives, given their lethargic way of dealing with this issue since 5 years ago? Do you sense some naivety, some arrogance, or some involvement in fraudulent activities?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. It's a very good point, actually, because the whole idea of this exercise is for you to help us to, provide the oversight that allows us or prevents any fraudulent activities. So I cannot tell you that. I think I'm just following up where we are now. But perhaps Finance Director, do you feel you have seen it, having followed up as a ministry for so long before today?
No, I can't say I see that. What I know for sure, what has been explained to me, is this is a challenge which is going to need, they've tried to correct it themselves in the projects office, but I think they have said, I'm not sure, but I think they have said that they now need to get Germany to come in to correct this issue. But we leave it with the projects office. Maybe you can call them in and they can try and also explain how this issue is going to be corrected.
Yeah, no, that's right. Honorable
thank you, Mr. Chair. My questions arise from unsupported expenditure. The Auditor General is to say, Section 81B, subsection 3 of the Public Finance Management Act, Chapter 22.19, read in conjunction with Treasury Instructions 2016, requires expenditure supported by receipts, goods received vouchers, invoices, or a proof of payment. Contrary to this regulation, the ministry made payments amounting to 97,504 for goods and services without source documents. Consequently, I could not satisfy myself whether the expenditure was a proper charge against the vote. If payments are made to service providers without supporting documents, it could result in expenditure being incurred for the purpose not intended, or fraudulent transactions could be processed. Now my questions are as follows. Why did the ministry process payments without adequate sorting? Number one. Two, have you been able to obtain source documents to support the expenditure in question? And number three, what measures have you put in place to ensure that all future payments are adequately supported by source documents?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Honorable. Indeed, the team has made lots of efforts to get the source documents in place, and we do have that we'll share with the auditors attached here. But to look at why we didn't do that in the past and what other measures we now are putting in place, I'll let our Director of Finances talk about for us.
Okay. I think maybe at the time of the audit, we were not able to get some of the documentation from our districts and our provinces. And like the PS has already said, these are now available for inspection by the auditors. But then another issue that also comes up is some of the receipts that we get from our suppliers, they issue an invoice, which is / a receipt. So when the auditors then look at this, they say, okay, there is no invoice, there is no receipt, but in actual fact, the supplier just uses one as uses the invoice / receipts as both. So anyway, we have all these now for our auditors to be able to inspect, and for purposes of this submission, we had just taken a sample, which we had made copies of, and we had submitted those, but now the paperwork is available for inspection. So why did we go ahead and make a payment without supporting documentation? We can't say made a payment without supporting documentation because it was there. We were just not able to get it from the districts and the provinces to HQ for inspection by the auditors on time.
Can you just clarify something? What is the tenor for the accounting manual? What does it say in terms of your, how does the HQ liaise with the provincial agencies in terms of these payments?
In the system.
In the system. Do you have any verification that even if the payments are done, we have a system, an internal system that we use to also make sure that the procedure are being adhered.
Okay, thank you. Our internal system checks and balances actually our internal auditor, who actually then goes and audits to see that all the payments that have been input into the system have the supporting documentation. And because at this stage, all we do is we submit to Ministry of Finance for payment on the basis that everything has been done according to procedure.
The director speaks about the invoice / being provided by the supplier. The invoice will give you a description of what has been supplied, quantities and so forth. The receipt will only give you the amount that you paid. It doesn't say what you're paying for. On the what you make your payments on the basis of this, obviously you should make the payment on the basis of an invoice. You only get the receipt after you've made the payment. What we need is we ask through the chairman for you to supply is the actual invoices to support these payments that you made.
Okay. Does the available documents now cover the whole amount of 97,500, or it's just a part documents which are in some another figures, or is it now covering the whole outstanding for the supported documents?
For what we have submitted to you is just a sample, but we have the full amount. But what we submitted to you, we just picked samples because it's quite bulky. But we have those now available for the auditors.
Sorry, Chair. it makes very sad reading that it looks like you have to wait for the Auditor General in order to put your issues in place. It's just right on Honorable's question, Chair's question, that you not have checks and balances before the Auditor General comes into play, because she is coming at the tail end, she is coming at the apex. And internal controls should, at least by that time, should have put in the source documents and the expenditures, the receipts, the invoices before she comes in. In my view, you are requesting this committee to push your point of educated, qualified people to man the offices and to deal with your establishment. But at this point, it becomes an issue of amplifying the deficiencies